Hi, I'm Ben Felder here at the state capitol, along with Oklahoma News Director Chris Casteel. And Chris, the 57th legislature is officially underway. Governor Kevin Stitt delivered his first State of the State address as governor, and the priorities he talked about on the campaign trail that he talked about at his inauguration, we heard them again today, along with a presentation of his budget.
Yeah, everything from the teacher pay raise to kind of reimagining the state budget, making it more transparent, putting more in savings than is legally required. Basically, we heard a lot of having more authority to hire and fire state agency directors. It basically, he laid out in this budget and in his speech today what he's been talking about for more than a year.
Well, the budget is always the big issue. The last few years, it's been a deficit. This year, we're expecting a surplus. Official numbers will come out in a few weeks. Right now, it's looking at maybe $612 million, although with the fluctuating oil prices, that may go down. Stitt said he wanted to fund a teacher pay raise, criminal justice reform, but you said a big emphasis towards savings, and he also didn't seem to grab up all that available money. There seems to be some wiggle room in what the legislature could do.
Right, he's proposing that they not spend a third of the savings. So right now, as he said, it's just an estimate, but it would be about $200 million that he wants to set aside in savings. That's going to be hard for the legislature, I think, especially after years and years of cutting budgets. You know, they've had 1 year where they just had some extra money. So there are all kinds of demands, all kinds of needs. His budget is basically flat for almost every agency, and I would have a hard time believing that it's going to stay that way.
So you talk about the difficulty the legislature may have in just putting a bunch towards savings, especially since so many lawmakers were recently elected with kind of the promise that they were going to reinvest in these state agencies that received some cuts. You know, do you think that maybe leaving some wiggle room kind of gives the legislature a chance to pick what their priorities are, and it doesn't hold Stitt to something he said today? If at the end of the year the legislature says, hey, we want to put $100 million towards the health department, or $100 million towards education.
Oh, I definitely think that number, that the 1/3 of the savings, I think that's definitely negotiable. I doubt he's going to threaten to veto a bill that doesn't, or veto a budget that doesn't set aside $200 million. There are all kinds of demands. I think he knows this is a negotiation.
Yeah. One thing that he did talk about funding was the teacher pay raise, a $1,200 pay raise to bring teachers to the tops in the region, at least for the time being. Other states are looking at their own pay raises, but only about $20 million to the Department of Education. That's not a big investment into the funding formula. You know, teachers walked out for 2 weeks over the idea of classroom funding, and he didn't propose a big investment. Do you feel like that's going to maybe be an issue this year?
I think so. I mean, I think that's where a lot of the negotiation will take place, is on common ed funding. Higher ed funding, corrections, I mean, I think those will be really the biggies. They have they have a ton of obligations off the top, whether it's property tax reimbursement for wind power, and then these things that he talked about in regard to Medicaid, the doctor training, and the CHIP, Children's Health Insurance Program. That's almost $80 million right there. So, and the ad valorem, the property tax, another $100 million. A lot of the money, then the so-called surplus, is committed already.
Yeah. One of the most interesting parts of the speech, I thought, was his talk about funding the graduate medical program and the Children's Health Insurance Program. You know, these are two programs that used to be funded by the feds, and now the state is responsible. And he kind of used this as an example of why he's skeptical of Medicaid expansion. He was opposed to expansion on the campaign trail. Last week, I don't think he said anything really new, but as legislative leaders were saying they're willing to have the conversation, he maybe, parsed his words enough to where people could say, hey, maybe the governor is open to having this conversation. Today he didn't, give any leeway on that. I mean, he said, hey, I'm still against Medicaid expansion, and he gave specific reasons why, because he said the state could be left holding the bag down the road if the feds choose not to fund something, which they've done before.
That's right, and it's kind of in the weeds. But one of the things that he was talking about the $60 million for medical school training, that was a waiver program that the Trump administration decided, or that was a waiver Oklahoma had, just wasn't really justified. If indeed that they were to expand Medicaid, and Congress, it wouldn't just be the administration, it would be Congress, decided not to fund that anymore, that would be a nationwide, everybody, every state in the nation would probably have to drop it at that point. So, maybe he's right in saying that you can't see down the road what's going to happen with Medicaid, but that would be a huge, huge decision that Congress would have to make, not to provide the 90% match they're providing now.
Well, when you're talking about the state of the state, you're also talking about standing ovations. As people are interested to see how many standing O's does he get, how many does he get from Democrats. He got quite a few actually today.
He did, except for on his top priority, really on most, besides the teacher pay raise, they did stand for that. On giving the governor more authority to hire and fire executives at these state agencies, Democrats did not stand. On his comments about Medicaid expansion, they definitely did not stand. On the savings, on putting more money into savings, they did not stand up. And I'm trying to remember, it seemed like there was another big one. You remember that they didn't stand on, that the Republicans were for, but on most of his top priorities, the Democrats sat on their hands.
Is that I feel like the Democrats are going to give their response here in a little bit, and we'll carry that as well. But I feel like the Democrats are kind of in a tough spot. Obviously they're a tough spot because they're the minority, but you have this new governor that right now Republican leaders are gung-ho about supporting. And a lot of the things that Stitt has talked about are getting kind of bipartisan. I mean, the criminal justice reform investments, trying to make state agencies more customer focused. I mean, putting your license on an app. I mean, those are things that people of all political persuasions can get behind. I almost feel like the Democrats kind of have to find something, not just to be negative about, but they have to kind of find some things to try to inject their voice into. And last week we heard Democrat leaders in the House and the Senate say, when it comes to the hiring and firing powers over state agencies, we have concerns about that. We'll see how that fleshes out. The Democrats don't have enough votes to stop that. But you're right, those are his big policy issues. And I mean, the Democrats are the opposition party, and I guess they got to find some things to be opposed to as well.
Yeah, and they, as you say, they don't have the numbers to stop anything. But I think he'll listen to him, and he made that clear too, and they stood for that, which was that he said, I'm going to be a listener. You come to my office. I want to hear what everybody has to say. I don't think that anything that they're necessarily opposed across the board to some of these things, but they definitely aren't all in on some of these things either. I mean, I think that they may still see some of these boards and commissions, some of these kind of protected agency directors as a checks and balances thing, that is needed to keep the governor from being too powerful. I'm not sure they would do that if the governor was a Democrat, but that's how they feel with with a Republican in office.
Yeah. Well, ever since the election, there was a lot of talk about kind of a renewed sense of enthusiasm towards the next session. A new governor, a lot of new lawmakers, Republican leaders have said that they've never seen so much positivity. But today's the first day of a session, so we're going to finally start to see some stress put on that kind of harmony that's been talked about a lot as bills start to move through committee, and the governor's agenda that he outlined is going to start to get worked on by the legislature. So with Chris Casteel, I'm Ben Felder. Our colleague Randy Ellis was also up here. He's going to be looking into specifically the budget, Stitt's budget for tomorrow's Oklahoman, and today on newsok.com. For the Oklahoman, I'm Ben. Thanks for joining us.